Hi, I'm Gavin Carlson, and this is Out of Bounds, Daily Bruin Sports Podcast. What is going on in Westwood? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Out of Bounds, the official sports podcast of the Daily Bruin. As always, I'm your host, Gavin Carlson, a fourth-year sports staff writer here at the Daily Bruin, and I'm joined by the face of the football podcast, the one and only fourth-year sports senior staff writer, Jack Nelson. How are you doing on this Monday after a Thanksgiving weekend?
I'm doing fantastic, Gavin. Had a great Thanksgiving. I will admit it was an emotional Saturday night for me at the Rose Bowl. I've been going to games at the Rose Bowl for a couple years now, and it's a special place, the special conference, Pac-12 being the last ever regular season game. So it was a pretty wild night, but we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah, I agree. Shout out to the people on Twitter that showed some love. I really appreciate all that. Same thoughts. Rest in peace, Pac-12 football at Rose Bowl. And maybe rest in peace, UCLA football program for a while, because what the heck happened at the Rose Bowl on Saturday night? Cal 33, UCLA 7. What adjective do you use to describe this performance for UCLA against a Cal team that, okay, maybe not as bad as Arizona State, but not much better? And to come off a USC win, all high and mighty, and put out that performance, we're going to talk about that game. Don't you worry. We're going to talk about the state of the program. We're going to talk about one Chip Kelly. There's way too many reports to keep track of right now. Some people saying he's gone. Some people saying he's staying. We're not going to get into what's being reported. We're going to get into our own opinions, what we think should happen, maybe what we think will happen. One thing we can't confirm already, Cam Brown, Keegan Jones already transferring out of the program. Don't be surprised if there's a down spiral of this program this offseason. But let's talk about the game first. Cal coming into the game 5 and 6, 5 and 6, 3 and 5 in the Pac-12. Not a good team. All right, they beat Stanford. Good for them. They beat who else? Arizona State. Good for them. I believe. I don't even know. This is not a good football team, and we lose Ethan Garbers early for UCLA. Dante Moore struggled, and the entire team struggled. What are your instant thoughts on? The worst loss of the season. I think this is the worst loss of the Chip Kelly era. What do you say?
I don't disagree, Gavin. I mean, it's almost impressive how you have such a big win over USC and then lay an absolute egg against California, and by all counts should have been a momentous win for UCLA. Obviously, you should have won this game. There was no question. All of us predicted it. And then you just go back to exactly the same point, if not worse, than you were against Arizona State. You're at home, and you score 7 points against a team that allowed 17 points and 21 to, North Texas and Idaho? You had 7 points. You were 1 for 5 in the red zone. Your quarterback, who clearly is the cog of the offense, Ethan Garbers, he's like, without Ethan Garbers, this offense can't do anything. Dante Moore comes in, immediately throws an interception, which was quite poetic. I mean, his first ever pass in Pac-12 play was an interception. Then he comes and throws an interception on his first play. Oh my God, it's crazy.
The last Pac-12
game ever. It's crazy. But yeah, it's just it's really hard to describe how crazy, how wild these past 3 games have been for UCLA. Just the absolute roller coaster. You go from the lowest of the low to pretty high, and then somehow even lower. So I'm at a loss for words, honestly.
We will get to Chip Kelly. I promise you we will get to Chip Kelly. But yes, Ethan Garbers. He led UCLA to a great win at USC. Of course, it hurts losing your starting quarterback in the middle of a game. It makes it very difficult. But for there to be that much of a fall off from the offense when you go from Ethan Garbers to not just a random backup. We're talking about a backup who started half the games this season for UCLA. That doesn't really count as going from a true starter. It's not like the NFL where the guy starts every game and when the backup comes in, you're like, oh, geez, right? You're going from Ethan Garbers, who started half the games this year, to another guy who started half the games this year. And for the offense to look that incompetent in every phase. Dante Moore, 23 of 38, 266, a touchdown and 2 picks. He had a fumble as well. The offensive line, I think, had probably its worst performance of the season. He was under pressure a lot. I know that's partially on Dante not getting the ball out a lot, but also the offensive line really struggled. But I'll be honest, I thought UCLA was going to just run the heck out of the football coming into the game. But especially once you lose Ethan Garbers, you're expecting UCLA to run the ball for 250 plus. I think last year in this matchup, they ran for 350 plus, if I remember correctly, 350 plus. So I was shocked. They ran the ball 36 times for 36 times for 70 yards net. You know, we count the sacks. It always messes things up. But that's an abysmal 1.9 yards per carry for this team that came into the game, top 10 rushing offense throughout the entire season. That was really surprising, as was a solid performance from Cal's running game. 4 yards a carry, not phenomenal, but against this UCLA defense, you expect more. Was there any phase, any unit in this game that played well? Because I haven't even talked about special teams yet. Was there any unit that played well for UCLA in this game?
The only unit that I would say might have had a decent game was the defense, because you have to consider the fact that special teams accounted for 17 of Cal's points. So that's 16 points defense allows on its own. So yeah. I guess that's okay for them. But at the same time, UCLA's run defense was the name of the game for this team. And this game, they allowed more than their average per game. They averaged 60-something rushing yards per game, allowed over 100 to Cal.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, Mendoza was all right, 19 of 30, 178, 2 touchdowns, 2 picks. Kamari Ramsey with a nice interception. And Latu, who, poor guy. I mean, a legend in the UCLA defense, and for him to go out like that in his last game, most likely, got a feel for him and a lot of the seniors for the game to end that way. What else do we say? We have to talk about the special teams, because there is bad. And then there is what we saw from UCLA special teams on Saturday. You give up a 99-yard kick return touchdown. You fumble your own kick return. And you miss, was it 23 yards? I think it was. A chip shot of all chip shots. And Chip Kelly has not recruited a kicker in a while that's been able to, get things done. You lose Nick Barmira, and it's been a disaster all year. I feel for some of the players in terms of, especially on that defense, like you said, they did a lot to try to keep the game close. But when you're giving up 99-yard kick returns in a game where your offense has already shown it's not going to give you anything, and then even when you get the ball back, you fumble the ensuing kick. It's just a disaster in every regard.
I will say one thing that I think really perfectly sums up the struggles for special teams for UCLA, because I think it ultimately comes down to the kickers and the lack of field goal success, because it's been awful this season. So there's been 13 UCLA kickers since 2000 who have attempted a field goal, right? And this season it was RJ Lopez and Blake Lester for UCLA. So RJ Lopez, he has a career 54.5% success rate on field goals. Blake Lester, 33.3%.
Oh my goodness.
That places 11th and 13th in 13 kickers that have kicked a field goal for UCLA since the turn of the century.
Yeah, mic drop from Jack Nelson. And those stats are even misleading, because they're not asking them to kick 55-plus yarders. They're missing 23-yard kicks. They're missing 37-yard kicks. They're missing 42-yard, right? They're not missing 57-yarders, right? And meanwhile, Cal, their kicker goes in and booms a couple in. Look, the operation's smooth. There's been issues with the operation and on field goals this year for UCLA. It seems funny to talk about field goals, but it plays a role when your offense has been as poor as it has been under an offensive head coach, which we're going to get to. You need to at least be able to convert field goals. If you can't convert touchdowns in the red zone, it's been an issue. I read something today after the game. I'll shout out my editor, Joseph Crosby. Asked a phenomenal question to Chip Kelly about the red zone struggles coming back, and Chip downplayed it. He said, I don't know what you're talking about red zone struggles. We were phenomenal in the red zone against USC. Yes, USC. You can't hang your whole season and your whole coaching tenure on one win against USC. The games before that, the red zone was awful. You remember that Arizona State game? 4th and 1 at the 1. Carson still gets stuffed. 4th and 1 at the 10, I believe. Carson still gets stuffed. Another 4th down that wasn't in the red zone. Carson still gets stuffed. The red zone offense, I believe, is the least efficient in all of FBS.
Yes, I will confirm that, Gavin. I will say that Chip almost straight up lie to Joseph's face in that conference. So in the month of November alone, UCLA played Arizona, Arizona State, USC, and Cal. Against Arizona, 2 for 5 in the red zone.
Yep.
Against Arizona State, 1 for 3. USC, 5 for 6, as Chip pointed to, their best red zone performance probably of the season.
Against the worst USC defense of all time.
Exactly. Big asterisk there. And then against Cal, 1 for 5. So they have a .618 red zone percentage this season, which, as you said, is last in the FBS.
And if I read that correctly, I think the percentage includes kicks being missed. It means they score on only 60%. not just touchdowns. But it's even worse. I mean, anytime you're the worst in the country at anything, but probably the most important thing in modern football, especially high-scoring Pac-12 football, we don't expect defenses to really stuff opposing offenses that often. It's just a matter of when a team gets to the red zone, do they score field goals or do they score touchdowns? And for UCLA, it's been field goals or nothing, right? Not even field goals. It's been 0 points a lot of times. A lot of fourth down fails, a lot of missed field goals, and a lot of stuffs, on third down, second down. And that comes down to, I think, play calling more than anything else. In the red zones, when you have to be the most creative, you don't have all this space to, run streaks down the field. And it's been really, really, really bad for UCLA. Do we just talk about Chip Kelly now? I feel like it's time.
I think it's time.
I think it is time. We'll start with this. All right. If you watched the episode or listened to the episode last week, you heard our opinions. Jack came in with a very valid argument of he went out, he did more research, and a lot of people were saying, hey, that win against USC is a huge win for the program. Chip Kelly not really supported by UCLA, the athletic department, the whole, UCLA foundation in terms of funding, in terms of NIL money, in terms of facilities, all that. That was his argument, very valid. My opinion was the Arizona State game alone is probably not a fireable offense on its own, but in a season where you're coming in with people calling for your job after an Arizona loss where people are calling for your job, to then have the Arizona State loss, in my opinion, fireable offense to the point where the USC game doesn't matter. This loss, I think on its own in a season might be a fireable offense. Maybe if you're not 8-0 coming into this game or something, but if you're having an average season like UCLA's had and you lose this game 33-7 in the last ever Pac-12 game, the last ever Pac-12 game at the Rose Bowl against an average Cal team, you did not show up, UCLA. And that's coaching. That's not, UCLA's roster is more talented than Cal's. You know that the coaching staff has more money invested in it. The facility, you can't use the facilities, the NIL money, the scholarship. That UCLA is a much bigger football program than Cal, to the point where they're going to have to start paying them calimony. And you got blown out. It was disgraceful. It was shameful that the Pac-12 had to say goodbye in that way. That is a fireable offense. And we're seeing reports that he might be staying. We're seeing reports that might be going. He should not be here already. It should be over. It should have been over after Arizona State. But this was like the most obvious nail in the coffin I've ever seen. Like, you can't come in when you are already people are already asking for your job, and you have to exceed expectations where people are calling for your job. You have to exceed them, not meet them, not go below them, not absolutely plummet miles below the expectations. You're favored by 10 points against Cal and you lose by 26. I've been ranting. Go ahead, Jack.
Yeah, I'll start by addressing my opinions last week, because as you mentioned, I did change my opinion originally from saying that Chip Kelly should be fired after the Arizona State loss. I have been looking at I'm kind of taking into account the outsider's perspective. I talked about how we been following the Pac-12 for a while. We know this UCLA football team very well. Been covering them all season long. I talked about how, from an outsider perspective, it seems like maybe Chip Kelly has, done the most with his resources or whatever. But the reality is, Chip's done. It's over. Like, this experiment, whatever it was, it's failed. There is no reason to justify keeping this man as the head coach of your football program at this point. You're 34-34 in 6 seasons. You're 7-5 in a season where, 8-4, 10-2 was the ceiling. A lot of people said 10-2 was the ceiling for this team. You had a whole lot of talent. You had Dante Moore. You had J. Michael Sturdivant. You had new talent Carson Steele. You had a bunch of new guys. You had just all the tools you needed for a solid season, and you go and play some of the worst games I've ever seen against Arizona State and Cal. Yeah. Your offense is just an absolute mess. And it's just a lack of accountability. We mentioned it earlier with Chip, just not taking accountability for the struggles on offense. And the fact that it's not just an execution issue. Like, of course, there are players who should be performing at a better than they are right now for UCLA. There's a lot of players that have come up short this season that have really disappointed a lot of fans.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, it comes back to the guy in charge. You're the coach. You're creating the culture. You're setting the expectations of what this team should do. And you at the end of the day, you take the responsibility. That's how it is. And simply, Chip has just not done that. This team has had mediocrity for far, far too long. And there's been previous head coaches that have been fired with better records than Chip has right now.
Yeah.
The list goes on and on. Like, what? Jim Mora, the last one.
Yes.
Then you had, before that, what was it?
I mean, Carl Durrell. I mean,
just
the fact that at least the Jim Mora era, I grew up watching, there were highs, like real highs. Of course, the lows were low, but there were highs. There was top 10 games. There was Anthony Barr. There was Eric Kendricks. There was Brett Hundley. There was big games against USC, beating Matt Barkley, like beating real USC quarterbacks in big games that meant something. The highs have not been high enough to justify these lows, these 33-7 to Cal lows. Like, a couple things. I want to talk about, because we could have come into this episode saying we think Chip Kelly should be fired and leave it at that. We already did that 2 weeks ago. We were surprised that it wasn't. I think I was going to come into this episode saying we all know Chip Kelly should be fired. He's going to be fired. Let's talk about what it means. We don't know if he's going to be fired. The fact that we are recording this on a Monday afternoon and he's still employed kind of makes me think he won't be fired. And
I'm leaning that way as well. I don't think he's going to be fired. And should he? Absolutely.
And the implications of keeping him or even drawing this out, if they wait till the end of the bowl game, if they wait a week, the implications, we're already seeing them. Cam Brown, Keegan Jones, transfer portal. Whether it's because they think Chip's going to be fired or because they think he's going to stay, it doesn't matter. Both of those players not used. Keegan Jones, phenomenal athleticism, speed, quickness. And you got Colson Yankoff running kickoffs back and fumbling. How do you think that makes Keegan Jones feel? This guy's an electric talent, should be Kaz Allen part 2. And you got Colson Yankoff doing kick returns. No wonder he's leaving. Cam Brown, been at UCLA forever, hasn't really produced that much. But you bring in J. Michael Sturdivant, you bring in Kyle Ford, and what have they done? Nothing. So, shocker, he's out of there too. We have recruits for UCLA. Derek McFall, I believe. 4-star, 3-star, 4-star running back. Tweeting that he's rolling his eyes at Chip Kelly rumors of him being fired. Now he might stay. He's still gone. Guess what? You lost him. Talented player going to SMU. The implications of the end of this season, regardless if Chip Kelly stays or leaves, are massive. And you're going into the biggest season in, is it fair to say next year is one of the biggest seasons in the history of UCLA football? You're in a new conference. You're in the Granddaddy Conference now. And if you start, you're looking at that schedule. How many you came, I think, a couple weeks ago, you look at that schedule and you say, okay, they're probably going to lose to USC. They're probably going to lose to Penn State. They're probably going to lose to Iowa. But at least they're going to beat Indiana. They're going to beat Minnesota. They're going to beat Rutgers. They can't beat Arizona State against a third-string quarterback and tight ends and running backs. They can't beat Cal. They can't compete with Cal. What are they going to do against Minnesota, an average Big Ten team? This team might have a losing record next year because the max exodus in this transfer portal is going to be Dante Moore might be gone. J. Michael Sturdivant, Carson Steele. I don't even think those guys, that was your transfer portal this year. And what did they do? Carson Steele fumbled the ball against Colorado a couple of times, had a game or two, didn't hear from much from him. J. Michael Sturdivant did nothing. Kyle Ford did nothing. So the transfer portal has been Chip Kelly's defense. Like, oh, I can't recruit high school players, but I could do it in the portal. Your portal players didn't do anything, and now you're going to lose players in the portal. It's a disaster.
I'll reiterate what you said about just the move to the Big Ten being a huge season for UCLA. I mean, there's no question. You're undergoing one of the biggest changes in program history.
Yes.
And the teams they're playing next season, it's not just the Big Ten. You've got LSU. You've got, of course, Oregon and Washington. Yes, Oregon and Washington. They're both playing next year. Yeah. So they have both Oregon and Washington on their schedule. Penn State, obviously, always a great team. Iowa can be a challenging
Those
opponent.
are the type of games.
USC, there's just the list goes on and on for how this is going to be. It's just the Big Ten will be a difficult schedule year in and year out. Granted, Pac-12 has been great this year. There's a lot of great teams, right? But it's just the step up in competition. I think Chip Kelly is going to make a fool of himself next year if he's still at the head coach of this program. I think he's going to look unprepared and utterly just incompetent in the Big Ten. He's going to get outcoached. The lack of recruiting is going to really hurt UCLA.
Yeah.
And you're going against some of the top defenses in the country year in, year out. If your offense is still in the shape that it is right now, you're going to accomplish nothing. Yeah. Like you're going to be dropping maybe like 10, 15 points a game. Like, I just can't see a future where Chip Kelly is the head coach and UCLA is a successful football program. They do not go hand in hand.
Yeah. Couple things before we end this. I know we could go on and on. Missed opportunity this season against a really bad schedule. And I know, like you said, the Pac-12 was better than expected with teams like Arizona suddenly being good. Teams like Washington State, when UCLA was playing them, being ranked. Obviously not now. Colorado being better than expected. But this was a weak schedule. This was a schedule where 8 wins needed to be the floor. And like I said last week, it's either, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, I don't know. It's either you compete for the conference title game, or you give the program something to look forward to next year. We know by now that they have done neither. This team did not compete for no conference title, and they have not shown anything to be encouraged for next year. But this program is taking huge steps back. When you think about next year, you talk about that schedule with an Oregon, with the Washington, with the USC. Think about where those programs are. Bo Nix will be gone. Michael Penix will be gone. Caleb Williams will be gone. LSU, Jaden Daniels will be gone. Like, there was a huge opportunity next year in a really good schedule to still be in a better position than some of these powerhouse teams just because of quarterback alone. You were going to have either an amazing Ethan Garbers or Dante Moore in the Big Ten against a bunch of programs that were going to have new faces at quarterback, right? You have totally blown that. You have totally blown that. And you are going to set your program back for 10 years if you show up in the Big Ten and the first 2 years you have a losing record. That's embarrassing. Then they're going to start talking about you being a Northwestern. Oh, you're a good academic school, but you're not competing with no Ohio State, no Michigan, no Penn State. Michigan State just took your coach. They just took your coach, UCLA. So now you're behind the powerhouses. Now you're behind the middle tier. And now we're talking about whether or not you can compete with Minnesota, with Iowa. And Iowa's a great team this year. But UCLA, you have blown the opportunity to be relevant at all. And you better hope that Mick Cronin and that basketball team can win some conference titles in the Big Ten, that Corey Close and that women's basketball team, that the rest of the programs, because football is not doing anything in the Big Ten. And we were talking about them being a middle tier team in the conference. They're going to be a bottom tier team in the conference with or without Chip Kelly because of how long they've kept him and because we're going to see a max exodus in the portal. A mass exodus. I can't talk, but Chip Kelly can't coach. So there you go. Jack, do you have any final thoughts?
I will say this. As you said, we've seen a lot of different reports. We don't know what's going to happen with Chip Kelly in this next week. I don't know. It might change before this podcast goes up. We don't really know. But it's just no way they can keep Chip Kelly and be a successful football program. It's just a disaster for UCLA. There's no question. As you said, they're setting themselves up for the dark ages of UCLA football. And they were in the dark ages when Chip was there for the first 3 or 4 years. This is the lowest the program had been in a long, long time. Yeah. And we're looking at that same thing playing out with the same head coach who's been there for 6 years. Yeah. 6 years. And what have they accomplished? No bowl games. No bowl game wins. Right? They're looking at another mediocre or relevant bowl game this season. What? Independence Bowl, the LA Bowl. Look, UCLA fans, if they have loyalty, I respect that for tuning in that bowl game, but yeah, there's nothing to be excited about this UCLA football team going into next season if Chip Kelly's still head coach. There's just no question.
Yeah, and it's not like it's not like the fans should make the decision on who, if a coach is fired or not. There's an athletic director for a reason. But is there a single UCLA fan that wants Chip Kelly to still be the coach of the football team? A single one? I think they're going to fly a fire Chip Kelly banner over Westwood pretty soon. Like, there's no justification for keeping him. Any aspect. The fans like him. No. Oh, there's been production. Oh, the program's increasing. No. Oh, we got to keep him next year because Dante Moore likes him. No, I don't really think he does based on how this season's gone. And I don't think there's many recruits that are saying now maybe what if they were last year, oh, Chip Kelly's a good offensive mind, I want to go to UCLA. The great offensive mind scored 7 points against Cal and 7 points against Arizona State. So we could go on and on. We won't. There's a bowl game coming up in a couple weeks. We don't know where UCLA is playing. They'll probably be playing in Shreveport, Louisiana, I believe, for the Independence Bowl. They got leaped by Cal in the bowl game rankings because of that loss, by the way. Cal wasn't even bowl eligible coming into the week. Stunning, flabbergasted, discombobulated. We need a thesaurus for the words to describe UCLA football right now. But that'll do it for this episode. UCLA Daily Bruin on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, SoundCloud to listen. We will have episodes because I think you have to talk about this team even without the bowl, even before the bowl game, even after the bowl game. Who knows who will be coaching this program the next time we record, but I don't really think it matters at this point. I think they waited too long. So that'll do it for this episode, Jack. Thank you so much, as always.
I will say this, just with the regular season wrapping up, I want to give a huge thank you to everyone who has tuned in so far this season. I know we've been working really hard on this for a long time. Big shout out to Gavin and Zoe. I know this was your brainchild. You guys have really been killing this. It's been really impressive. So shout out to everyone who has tuned in. We really, really appreciate the support all season long. And we've got a lot more coming for you later this year. So
absolutely,
tuned.
a lot coming. Football season might be over, but UCLA is a basketball school. We all know that, and basketball season is just getting started. So thanks so much. We love you, Out of Bounds listeners. We love you. Take care. So long.